Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jake McCabe, and I'm a pre-sales director with LogPoint. I'm going to be spending some time today talking about LogPoint and how, specifically how it relates to the financial services sector. So first, a little bit about LogPoint, if you're not familiar. LogPoint is a software company. We are based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and we have products in the SIM and UEBA space. We have roughly between 200 and 300 employees. I'm not sure of the exact number because we've been hiring quite a bit lately, but those employees are essentially based primarily in some throughout Europe. We have a fairly large engineering and support center in Kathmandu, Nepal. And then of course, we've got some other folks throughout the rest of the world, like the United States, where I am located. We are a subscription. We offer our product through subscription, and we're very happy to report that we have a 98% renewal rate. We've been recognized by analysts such as Gartner, and we're in their Magic Quadrant, and we have roughly more than 1,000 customers worldwide. So basically, LogPoint is offering SIM services. So we're basically helping customers, including financial customers, but really all types of customers. We're helping them to improve their security posture and their situational awareness. And typically, when talking about that, I first like to start the conversation by talking a little bit about the threat landscape. And first, we have some data here that's actually came from the Verizon data breach report. And really, the first thing that I'd like to talk about is a little bit about who tends to be behind these breaches that are responsible for that are related to these companies. And what we find is that 50% or roughly 50% is related to organized crime, 28% is related to internal threats, and 12% state affiliated actors. And to me, what jumps out as being important about this is that, or notable about this, is the fact that we have more than 60% essentially professional criminals, professional adversaries. And so what this really tells me is that companies need to take security very seriously. We no longer live in the age where we have teenage kids who are in their parents' basement launching attacks. These are very very well resourced adversaries, and so certainly we would need to make sure that our security controls are commensurate with the threat that's posed. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about these two graphs to the right here. So we essentially have the time to compromise and the time to detect. And what we're finding, or actually I should say what Verizon has reported, is that the majority of these breaches that occur, 87%, are actually taking, the actual compromise is taking minutes. And so they're happening very quickly. So looking at the time to compromise, basically the majority of these compromises are taking place within minutes. And if we look at the time to detect, an almost equal share of them are actually taking months to detect. So certainly there's a gap here. Basically, these breaches are happening too quickly. It's taking companies too long to detect them. So really, what we're trying to do as security practitioners is to close that gap and make it so that we're detecting those breaches more quickly, and we're making it more difficult for those breaches to actually occur. So specifically, as it relates to financial services, financial services in many ways are like all other industries in that they're dealing with a lot of the same threats. But what we tend to see, some of the challenges that are probably more pronounced with respect to financial services. First of all, is the cybersecurity skills shortage. The fact that there aren't enough talented people, skilled people to actually help to staff these positions. Of course, this is something that's not unique to financial services. However, it might be felt more acutely within financial services. And the second point being overly complex and manual processes preventing threat detection And so, once again, financial services, in my experiences, I would say to some degree it's fortunate in the sense that, financial services are not potentially as starved for budget money as potentially some other industries, because they do have compliance and audit requirements that help them to get the funding they need. However, what I've seen personally in my experience is that many financial services companies have a lot of the related security tools. However, those tools often operate in silos, and so without something that can kind of bring them together, you have a situation where you've got a lot of tools which are difficult to use, and there's a lot of manual integration that is required. And certainly something that's true across most verticals, but a lack of visibility across network and applications, leaving institutions vulnerable. And once again, that this is not necessarily unique to financial services, but it's certainly being felt acutely by them. And then, data privacy and compliance. This is something that I think does, that is potentially felt more acutely by financial services companies. Certainly, data privacy is something that is becoming increasingly important, certainly across Europe, but across North America and the rest of the world as well. So being able to, to guarantee not only the integrity of your data, but also making sure that you're maintaining the privacy of your customers is very important, and it comes with obviously some pretty severe financial penalties when that privacy is breached. And then something that's once again, it's true across many verticals, but potentially maybe more acutely in financial services, is the fact that data is now being managed outside of the organization, largely due to the pandemic. And so what we saw, across the world, across all verticals, is that the pandemic changed the way we work. It forced people to work outside of the office, and it forced companies to adjust their IT services and offerings to facilitate that. And I think financial services is probably a laggard in the sense that financial services oftentimes they were very more traditional brick and mortar type operations where employees worked within the walls of the building, and the resources were housed within the walls of the data center. And really COVID threw a wrench into that. And so I think financial services had to struggle a little bit, perhaps more than others, in the sense that they had to kind of give up that control that they had been used to, and basically, kind of jump into the cloud, maybe more quickly than some others who had been doing it gradually over time before that. So just to talk a little bit about LogPoint and SIM, and for those who aren't familiar with what a SIM is, basically the SIM is an acronym. It stands for Security Incident and Event Management, and really what you can think of a SIM as being that solution which is able to take in the security related information from around the organization, and being able to essentially kind of normalize it, aggregate it, correlate it, store it, and then allow the users within an organization to run analytics, to be able to access that information for the purposes of understanding situational awareness. So being able to understand what's going on, being able to detect breaches, and being able to have the necessary information to respond appropriately to breaches. And this supports not only security. Of course, cybersecurity is the primary driver for this, but it also supports compliance and audit. It supports IT operations as well, and even business analytics. So to go a little bit deeper into SIM and how LogPoint specifically works, basically within the core SIM, we've got three functional components: collection, storage, and analytics. Collection deals with getting that security-related information into the system. The great thing about technology is that essentially technology is software, and software is it can be very easy to make software record a log. And so essentially what you can have is, you can think of this as having detective controls throughout your environment. And basically, you can have a lot of logs, and a lot of logs give you a lot of visibility. However, the downside to this is that having all these logs come in and all this visibility means that it's really difficult to process this, to know what you should be looking at that moment, because essentially it's a you could become over inundated with information. And so really the goal of a SIM is to take in a large collection of information and to output a very small amount, which is basically telling you what is the most important thing that you should be paying attention to with respect to security at that time. And so the way LogPoint is doing this, obviously with collection, we want to get that data in. We want to be able to normalize and classify it. Basically, we want to take that data from disparate sources and put it into a common language so that we can easily compare it from one source to another. And we want to be able to classify it so that we know exactly what a particular log is related to. We can enrich it with other information, with other context from other sources, and we can then store that data and make it available for analytics and for all types of purposes. So with respect to analytics, what we're talking about is use cases for the SIM. What do you want the SIM to be able to tell you? Do you want the SIM to be able to provide you visibility? Do you want it to help you perform threat detection? Do you want it to provide information that helps you respond to an incident? And so all of this is a function of the analytics and the ability to store that data and to be able to retrieve it within a reasonable amount of time. And so this core SIM basically supports other complementary products. And so within the context of LogPoint, LogPoint also offers a cloud-based UEBA. So UEBA stands for User and Entity Behavioral Analytics. LogPoint also offers a director, which is a management console, and will help larger organizations to manage multiple LogPoint appliances. And then, of course, SOAR stands for but basically a category of tools that provide security orchestration and automation. And so LogPoint complements those types of tools very well, and can often act as a trigger for some type of automated response. So what we're seeing in terms of use cases for LogPoint from the financial services sector, first of all, it's data privacy and compliance. It's so basically LogPoint allowing customers to helping them to protect their data, also helping them to remain compliant with the various regulations that are out there with respect to data privacy. So things like GDPR, PCI, for example. They have requirements, and some of those requirements include having some mechanism for collecting logs and analyzing them. And so to that extent, LogPoint checks that box. But also, LogPoint provides a mechanism for allowing the auditors. For example, going through an audit without a SIM can be a very laborious process because it requires a lot of manual, collection of data, and LogPoint can greatly facilitate that. And so companies are using LogPoint both as a means to check a box, but also as a means to accomplish an actual audit. And then, of course, insider threats. And so, being able to detect those threats which originate from the inside. And the reality is the days of someone coming in through a hole in the firewall and accessing a resource directly are pretty much gone. I mean, basically the way all breaches occur nowadays is someone from the outside will find some way to compromise an internal system, and then basically from there on out they will operate internally. So from the standpoint of whether it's an insider threat or an external threat, it really looks the same. And the way you need to protect your environment is from the perspective of everything is an insider threat now. And the way LogPoint can do that is it can help to look for basically anomalous behavior. So being able to understand what your users and the entities within your environment typically look like, and then using that as a basis for detecting subtle anomalies, which could be indicative of threats. And then, of course, data exfiltration is often the end result or the end goal for these breaches. Being able to compromise an organization's critical assets, and oftentimes those assets are they're actually data, and so LogPoint is helping organizations to quickly detect things that could result in data exfiltration, as well as detecting breaches at various levels along the way, both before and during things like data exfiltration. And we can do so by once again looking for strange or anomalous behaviors, looking for large streams of data, or in some cases very slow streams of data, because the adversaries are kind of wise to the fact that if you try to take all the data out very quickly, you'll sound some alarms. So oftentimes it's those low and slow attacks that are actually more difficult to detect, but oftentimes that is the preferred mechanism of stealing data. So once again, kind of what does a SIM do, and what can it provide from a situational awareness perspective? And really, the SIM can serve as the single source of truth. And so when you do have, when something does occur, obviously being able to detect it very quickly is important. But more importantly, being able to answer questions like, what exactly happened, who was involved, when did it start, how did it get in, what was accessed, and how do we respond? These are all questions that that you would want to be able to answer. It's not good enough to just have some type of preventive control like a firewall, and being able to say I'm fairly confident that we would have blocked an attempt to actually compromise our systems. It's nowadays you really need to be able to answer all of those questions. Understanding when something may happen and what actually might have happened is equally important. So I mentioned a little bit about UEBA, or user and entity behavioral analytics, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because this is a very important part of LogPoint's security offering, and you can think of the types of security detections that can occur within the core SIM are very much rule based. So you can basically tell LogPoint to look for certain types of known bad activity, and it can alert you to that. But with user and entity behavioral analytics, you can actually detect things for which you have not explicitly told LogPoint to look for. So what I mean by that is, things that are not so black and white, things that are more difficult to discern, things like an account compromise, account misuse, internal recon, data staging, and exfiltration. These are all things that are difficult to detect because oftentimes the activity that underlies them looks like legitimate activity. And so the challenge comes in is being able to discern whether something is legitimate or potentially nefarious. And so the LogPoint's UEBA is able to accomplish this once again by leveraging essentially machine learning techniques to build baselines of the way that users and entities typically behave in the environment. It can then use those baselines to detect very subtle changes in behavior, which would constitute an anomaly. And then it can look at those anomalies from a macro perspective to see if multiple anomalies are occurring with respect to one single user within a relatively short amount of time frame. That could essentially have the effect of raising the suspicion around that user. And so we can basically say that user has a higher risk. Let's focus our efforts on watching what that user does. And so this is really the approach that UEBA takes, and it's really a very complementary approach to the more of the rule-based approach of the core SIM. And so just as a quick use case for UEBA, and this is, this is an actual use case from a financial institution, but being able to detect things like after hours and weekend theft via printing. And so, basically, one of the threats that an organization can face is obviously its users, attempting to steal corporate assets, data. And one of the ways that could occur is by printing out records of customers, for example. And so this is something that LogPoint could detect through UEBA, and you wouldn't necessarily have to program anything to do this. It's something that LogPoint would simply detect based on changes in behavior. And some of the analytics that would be involved would be looking at activity that occurs at unusual times, and that could be unusual times of the day, or it could be unusual days of the week. We could be looking at things like unusual volume of printing. So if someone's printing out hundreds of pages on a Saturday, that could be suspicious, and it would be tagged as such. And then we can also look at some of the other detection methods that we have for detecting things like defense evasion. So if someone has actually also done some things on their system within the category of defense evasion, like maybe they've disabled logging, for example. And so being able to being able to understand that occurred along with some of these other suspicious things, and then also exfiltration. Perhaps we saw some activity that's going to an external site. Potentially we saw that user sending emails to an email address outside of the organization. All of these things together essentially give you the they have the effect of raising the suspicion on that user, and this is how LogPoint can help you to detect those types of activities. So, so another aspect of LogPoint, which is I think important to mention, is we have aligned our product very closely with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And for those who are not familiar with MITRE ATT&CK, basically MITRE, the MITRE Corporation is an American corporation, which is known as an FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center. So it receives its funding from the US government, and it engages in research research projects around around certain things like information security or cybersecurity. And they've basically built this what's known as the ATT&CK framework. So ATT&CK is an acronym which stands for Adversary, Tactics, and Techniques, and Common Knowledge. And so the MITRE ATT&CK framework is basically kind of a it's a framework which outlines all of the known adversarial tactics and techniques. If you're familiar with other types of other frameworks, such as the the kill chain, for example, this is similar to that, in that basically what they've done is they've enumerated each of the different stages along an attack, and for each of those stages they've enumerated each of the various tactics and techniques, or I should say each of the stages is essentially a tactic, and each of the ways that you could do that is a technique. And so by understanding the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it can help organizations it can help them both from a proactive and a reactive standpoint with respect to their security. So from a proactive standpoint, it can help organizations understand where they have security controls and where they might have weaknesses. And from a reactive standpoint, it can help them to be able to understand potentially who an adversary might be, based on noticing patterns in the techniques being used. It can also help organizations to predict potential next steps that an adversary may take, based on understanding their weaknesses, as well as potentially who that adversary might be. So it's a really important tool for organizations to help them mature their security program. And LogPoint has aligned its product with the MITRE ATT&CK framework, such that all of the detections that LogPoint can make and performs, each of those detections is mapped to the ATT&CK framework. And so you can then understand, when you have some type of detection that comes, potentially something out of the box that LogPoint has created, you can understand where that fits in the framework, and it can help you to understand, kind of how that fits into the security protection with not only LogPoint, but your other security tools as well. And so, why is this important? So if we think about UEBA and we think about the attack framework, what we're really doing is LogPoint is helping organizations to understand attack behavior. And the reason why this is important, so this slide was developed by a gentleman named David Bianco, who I believe was an incident responder with FireEye several years ago. And what he proposed is that we have this pyramid, which he referred to as the pyramid of pain. And he basically said that IOCs, or indicators of compromise, are relatively easy to detect, or some of them can be relatively easy to detect, but some of them have more value than others. And so he basically proposed that things like hash values, so being able to detect a hash value of a known bad file, like an antivirus would do, that's relatively trivial to do. You can do that, and it's very effective because if you find that hash value, that you've come across that malware. However, it's also trivial for an adversary to change that hash value. So an adversary can change one bit in the source code, and that would essentially have the effect of changing entirely the hash value. And so therefore, it can easily thwart your defenses. And so going up the stack, IP addresses are also relatively easy to detect, but also relatively easy for the attacker to change them. And so if we move up the spectrum, we have things that are increasingly more difficult, to detect, but also more difficult to change. And at the top of the pyramid, we have TTPs, which is, once again, that's tactics, techniques, and procedures. And that roughly responds to behaviors. So when we're talking about the tactics, techniques, and procedures, we're talking about an adversary behavior, and that's difficult to to detect and to understand. However, it's also really difficult for the adversaries to change those things. So what LogPoint is attempting to do is to help our customers understand those TTPs, and we do so through through things like UEBA, but also through things like integration in alignment with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So, another important component of LogPoint is the integration of threat intelligence. So LogPoint is not a threat intelligence company. However, we do offer flexible integration options with some of the leading threat intelligence providers out there. And so threat intelligence, once again, that's basically a way to get access to those IOCs, basically those known indicators of compromise, and very quickly being able to find, kind of the known bad activity in your environment. And of course, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, but SIM is really more than security. So its primary function typically is to support the cybersecurity organization, but there is a lot of value that can be garnered from other groups as well. So things like compliance, once again, compliance will leverage very heavily, will lean very heavily on having a SIM like LogPoint, and once again, that's to satisfy conditions. So in many cases, they need to say that they're looking at certain things, that they've implemented certain controls, but also that they have to answer to the auditors. And so, having a SIM with all this information that the auditors will need and being able to recall it very quickly is really important. IT operations can also leverage the LogPoint as well, because a lot of the same information that you collect for security is also very useful from an IT operations standpoint. So being able to understand, kind of the volume of traffic and the speed with which packets are getting from point A to point B, and being able to have access to logs from things like network devices. This is all the information that has security value as well as IT operations value as well, and of course business analytics too. So being able to understand things that are more business related, potentially activity related to, for example, website activity. It's information that would be very helpful to security, but also helpful to the other business folks who might have being able to get a lot of value from being able to analyze as well. So why LogPoint? What is LogPoint very good at? So certainly, what our customers like about us is first of all is our analytics. So we have a very powerful analytics engine. We have very powerful means for displaying the analytics that we can generate. So we definitely get high marks for kind of our ability to being able to present data in a very impactful way. We're also, like I said, very adept at being able to perform very complex correlations. So, not just taking the word of one data source, but being able to correlate that among many data sources. And then ultimately, what you're getting with this advanced analytics is it's helping you to reduce your time to action. So being able to understand very quickly what's the most important thing going on in your environment, where do I need to put my attention, that's very important. And basically, allowing you to not waste time on noise and being focused on, the most critical issue to address at that moment. And then, so the other thing that our customers really like about LogPoint is we have a very fast time to value. And so what that means is that, from the time that you begin implementing LogPoint to the time that it's actually fully operational and providing value is, typically for most customers that's on the order of about 5 days. And obviously sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer, depending on, kind of the customer and the use cases. But really the reason why we are, we have such a short time to value is because as a company, we've developed a very large collection of out-of-the-box content. And what that means is that when it comes to building the analytics, building dashboards, building the alerting rules that you want to have, basically LogPoint has done all that already. And so we have a large collection of content that you can simply enable. And really what that is going to do is that's going to greatly reduce the amount of time that it takes to deploy LogPoint and to tune it and to customize it for your environment. So LogPoint has been recognized by Gartner. As I mentioned, we are we've been included in their Magic Quadrant for the past 3 years. We do also have common criteria certification, the EAL 3+ certification, and that speaks to the security of our product and the methods that went into developing it. And then, we're also recognized by Gartner Peer Insights, which is actually something that we're, I think, probably more proud of than simply the Gartner Magic Quadrant, because the Gartner Peer Insights is basically, reviews that are performed by our customers, and we actually, we compared very favorably to our competition in all categories, and so that's something that we're very proud of. And so if you'd like more information about LogPoint and you'd like to view some case studies, you can feel free to visit our website at www.logpoint.com. And there we have several case studies which I can just highlight very quickly. We've got an insurance company that where we helped to improve their visibility across the entire IT architecture and help them to reduce incident response time. We have a payment processing customer for which we helped them achieve compliance and scale their security requirements. And then there's another pension provider that we basically help them to improve their security while reducing the amount of time and effort that it takes to do that. So if you're interested in learning more about these companies and these case studies, please feel free to visit our website. And then at this point, I want to pause for questions. And so if you do have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And so let me just see if there are any right now. And so, there's a question of how is LogPoint licensed? So LogPoint is actually licensed based on log sources. What that means is we do not license based on consumption, on a consumption model, or basically we're not we're not licensed based on volume. We're based on log sources. So that means that the licensing cost is very predictable. If you have 100 devices producing logs, and you can turn them up to the highest logging levels that you'd like, and there's no additional cost. You can have multiple LogPoint appliances supporting that. Once again, there's no cost for the appliances. It's simply a cost based on the number of sources. And then our UEBA product is actually licensed based on the number of entities that are being monitored. So typically that corresponds to the number of users as well as the number of servers that you would like to monitor. So it doesn't look like there are any other questions at the moment. So at this point, I would just like to thank everyone for joining me this morning / afternoon. And once again, my name is Jake McCabe, and my email address is jmc@logpoint.com. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments after this presentation. But otherwise, I would say, once again, thank you very much and take care.